Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and I have been putting out 2 videos a week now because there are just so many wonderful examples and transcripts in this book by Martha Sweezy, and I really just want to share as many as I can. So today I am sharing from chapter 8, page 133, an example of Martha working with 2 polarized parts. And this is fascinating and so applicable because polarizations happen everywhere, inside us and outside of us. So it can happen between parts inside of us or between people, between businesses, religious groups, governments. A polarization is a burdened system's way of trying to achieve balance. It's basically one man hanging this way outside the boat, so the other man hanging out in an equal and opposite direction, trying to achieve balance in this very extreme way. But there is another way with self as the mediator. So this is what Martha says on page 133. Every extreme protector is balanced by another protector. IFS calls this a polarity. When a proactive manager becomes extreme, a reactive firefighter steps in to create balance, or vice versa. The manager disapproves of the firefighter's tactics and then doubles down, and the firefighter follows suit, and they just keep getting further and further outside that boat and more extreme. So these 2 parts become increasingly hostile toward one another and more extreme. If the client speaks from or about one protector, you can assume that the opposing side is in the wings. So whether you're noticing this in yourself or in a client, if there is an extreme part in you or in someone else, you can be guaranteed that the equal and opposite exists, that it is there. Now, it might have been dormant for days, weeks, months, years, but it is there. Okay, so because we don't want shadow players, basically like subconscious parts that are running the show, but we're not aware of them, we get polarities out in the open by naming them. If we're just hearing about one side of a polarity, we guide the client or ourselves to notice the other side. For example, we might guide the client to notice how they respond to excessive inhibition. Do you ever rebel against all that responsibility, right? Like maybe they have a part that shoulds on them and tells them, you have to work hard, you have to take care of people, you have to do this, 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 and this. And you might ask, oh, is there a part in you that ever rebels against that? Or we might notice how they respond to excessive disinhibition. For example, do you ever feel concerned about watching TV all night? Again, there's no shame or judgment in it. It's genuine curiosity, right? If a client or in yourself, you notice a part that is binging or excessive, right? And with food or alcohol or television or social media or whatever, you can get curious. Is there another part of me that hates that, that's frustrated by it, that judges it? Because likely the 2 are absolutely there. Not likely, they are there. So then we can validate the concerns of both sides, find out who they protect, and offer to help the exile. That is the way to solve extreme polarizations, is to listen to them both, validate them, find out. Sometimes they're protecting the same exile, sometimes they have 2 separate exiles. Sometimes one of them is really the burdened one with the exile, and the other is just trying to achieve balance by going the opposite direction. So helping whatever this one protects will actually help both of them come into balance and harmony. So getting to know, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this, if you weren't ultra responsible, or if you didn't binge on this, what happens, can help point you to what they protect. And then if you can go there and witness and love on and reparent retrieve, unburden that exile, they don't have to do their extreme job anymore. So let me give you this beautiful example. This is a client named Ilsa. All right. So the therapist, Martha, says, so I hear one team of parts browbeats you to stay at work late, to be compulsively careful about your notes, go in on Saturday if you haven't finished everything, and so on. In general, this team makes you much slower and more thorough than your colleagues. So in response, you have parts who are desperate for a break. This is a really common polarity, which is a part that pushes you, like a hardworking taskmaster type part, maybe a perfectionist part, that pushes you to do your best, do it thoroughly, all of that. And then another part that's just so exhausted by it, sometimes we'll call it a procrastinator, that just wants to do nothing. So the part that wants to take a break, does things like keeping you up late at night watching binge-worthy TV, urging you to eat a gummy of cannabis as soon as you get home so that you don't spend the evening fretting about work, or eating snacks for hours after dinner. So she's just reflecting back the teams of polarized parts that this person has been talking about. And Isla's fearful manager says, I feel trapped. The therapist says, I hear that. And Isla's manager says, I have to be thorough at work. I have no choice. My supervisor is pitiless. So this is the manager that keeps her working, is kind of like defending itself. This is why I have to do this. And the therapist says, yes, there's that proactive team. So then Isla's firefighter comes in and says, I just can't keep this up. I'm so tired. I can't even get the basics done on weekends. So the firefighter, the polarized part that's so tired of it, the therapist can recognize, oh, this is the firefighter talking now. So the therapist says, here's the other team. Let's get both teams together with you for a chat. And Isla says, how? And the therapist says, invite them to meet you at an expandable conference table. You sit at the head so you can see them all. Now, just notice who shows up and let me know when everyone is there. So there's a long pause as Isla is inviting all the parts to the table. And then she says, okay. The therapist says, do you see them? She's checking for, what's your sensory experience of them. And Isla's manager says, no, they're arguing. The therapist says, ask them to stop for a moment and look at you. She nods, and the therapist says, how do they respond? Isla says, they're quiet. The therapist says, let them know that we have been listening and we are aware that both sides have valid concerns. Will they let you help? Isla's manager says, they want to know who I am. That's a good question. The therapist says, well, what do you say? Isla says, I don't know. Okay, so if she doesn't know, that means that she's not in self, right? So the therapist is asking, who do you say you are? To check if she's in self energy or not. She says, I don't know. So she's likely blended with the manager, maybe, or one of the parts that doesn't know who self is. So the therapist says, ask the part who is standing in for you to scoot over and sit next to you. Then ask for a volunteer who would like to find out more about you. I love this technique that Martha Sweezy does. Whenever she'll have, and Mike Elkin is the one I think who first discovered this, where you can ask a part, who do you see when you look at me? And the parts will often reveal who we're blended with. So they'll say, you're the part that tries to get me to stop doing what I'm doing, or they'll say, you're a little girl, or you're so afraid, or they'll say something, that's not self. And so then you can say, okay, I'm going to ask the one who's afraid or controlling or little to just sit right next to me. Now, who do you see? It's a really effective technique. Okay, so and then she asked for a volunteer to find out about the Isla who is not a part. I like that phrase too. So then they choose the one in the suit. So I think that's the manager. And the therapist says, ask the one in the suit to look you in the eye and let you know who they see there. Isla says, she sees a scared little girl. So then Martha says, ask the scared little girl to scoot over and also sit right next to you on the other side. Then ask the suit to look again. Who does she see now? Isla said, someone she doesn't know. The therapist says, how does the part respond to that person? So she's still trying to see, are you in self, right? Often this is a response. When the self does appear, the parts say, who are you? I don't know who you are. I haven't met you before. But still checking, how does that part respond to the part she doesn't know? And Isla says, she seems uncomfortable. She's afraid that I won't need her. And the therapist says, what do you say? Isla says, we can work it out. I'm fair. So the therapist knows now that Isla is in self because one, the protective part was comfortable enough telling her the fear. I'm afraid that you won't need me anymore if you're in charge, And then she asks for Isla's response, and Isla's response is kind and calming and confident, right? And is sharing space. We can work it out. I'm fair. Often the self will say, oh no, I'm not trying to get rid of you at all. You have a very valuable place within me, things like that. So then the therapist knows she's in self. So now she can go to what does she protect? So she's asking, what does the suit that's looking at Isla's self protect? And Isla says, the little girl, right? So she saw Isla as the little girl because that's who she's fixated on. That's who she protects, this part that keeps her working and working for approval. And that's why she thought she was the little girl. So now the little girl's next to her. So now we have the team of the managerial parts, the team of the binging and numbing parts. And now the managerial part, the workaholic part, has seen the self and the little girl next to her and revealed, this is who I protect. So then the therapist says, ask everyone at the table to look at you now. Would she, the working part, and all the other parts here be willing for you to help the little girl? So we've got everybody at the table. And so now she can wait for a response. Maybe there's concerns. Maybe there's something that they want to be done before, or a fear they have about helping the little girl, and they can address that together, the client's self, Isla's self, and the therapist's self. But now the next step would be to go to the little girl and to help her, because then this workaholic part won't feel so compelled to have to do that. It won't be so extreme. And then the numbing part won't have to balance her out. So I thought that was just a beautiful example and wanted to share it with you. If you have any questions or you want to share your examples of polarized parts in the comments, I would love that. Thanks for sharing this time with me.